All right, good evening everybody. Welcome back to Harvest Moon Farm. Tonight I'm going to make a couple of things I've never made before. So I'm going to make some fried rice and I'm going to make some beef and broccoli. And then in the morning I think I'm going to, I've got some sourdough bread that I'll be starting, that I can make, that I'll be able to bake tomorrow morning. And then I think I'm also going to make some blueberry bread, since when I made that jelly I said it and now I can't stop thinking about it. So we're going to start with the rice. And I need a cup and a half of rice, and I think I'm going to have to go downstairs and get some. Alright, so I went and got a new bag of rice from my storage downstairs. And I need another half a cup. And I'll go ahead and get this started cooking in my rice cooker. And while it's cooking, we'll go ahead and start the beef and broccoli. I added 1.5 cups of rice, and I'm going to add 3 cups of water. And then I'm going to put this over on my other counter while I'm working here, because as this cooks, it tends to spray water out. So I'm going to move it. Okay, so I'm starting with a piece of flank steak. The recipe calls for 1 to 1 1/4 pounds. I don't know exactly how much this is. I bought a half a cow last year, I guess, and this package doesn't have a weight on it. I'm assuming this is about that. What we're going to do is slice our steak into thin strips. Oh, this might be more than 1 1/4 pounds. We're going to slice it into really thin strips. We want it to be no more than 1/4 inch thick. And then we're going to put it in the Ziploc bag, and we're going to add some other ingredients in here when we're done. And the dog is standing here patiently waiting, hoping that I'll drop a piece. Alright, so we've got our beef all sliced up now, and so we're going to add 1/4 cup of cornstarch, put it in, or zip the bag up, and we're going to give it a shake to coat the meat with the cornstarch. And yes, I am using cornstarch and not baking soda. Won't make that mistake again. Alright, so I'm going to put this in here with the meat. And we're going to zip it up and give it a good shake. And I think I must have a little more than 1 1/4 pounds in here based on how this is covering. So I'm going to go ahead and add just a little bit more to make sure that everything gets coated well. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and set this aside now while we make the sauce for our beef. To our saucepan now, we're going to add a tablespoon of olive oil, a tablespoon of sesame oil, 4 cloves of garlic, and 2 teaspoons of ginger. So there was our olive oil, so we're going to add a tablespoon of sesame oil. And so this is all of the regular olive oil that I have left. So I think I might have to almost immediately break one of my own pantry challenge rules and get more olive oil. I thought I had another container downstairs, and I do not. So I don't know if I can go 2 months with no olive oil. So I do have some garlic cloves in my freezer, but I'm going to go ahead and use some of this minced garlic that I have in the fridge. So each clove minced makes about a teaspoon, so I'm going to go ahead and add 4 teaspoons of this minced garlic. And then I'm going to add 2 teaspoons of ginger, and I'm going to use my half teaspoon measure since my other one now has garlic on it. All right, so we are going to put this on the stove and start heating it up. All right, so we want to heat this on medium high. For about a minute, or just until the garlic starts to get fragrant. We want to be very careful that we don't scorch our garlic or our sesame oil, because it will be really nasty if we do. All right, so looks like that. So to this, I'm going to add a half a cup of soy sauce, and I am using low sodium soy sauce. So I'm going to add that. And I need a half a cup of water. And 3/4 of a cup of brown sugar. And then we want to stir that up until the sugar is all dissolved. And then we're going to bring it to a boil and let it cook for 2 to 3 minutes. I don't know if you guys can see what my rice cooker is doing there, but it's throwing liquid all over my counter. All right, so this is boiling. We're going to cook it for about 3 minutes. And then we're going to turn it down to a simmer and let it cook for 5 minutes. And during that 5 minutes, it should thicken up and reduce a little bit. So we've got just 1 more minute left on this, and then we'll put it on a simmer. Okay, so the timer just went off for our boiling. So I'm going to move this to a smaller burner while I let it simmer. And we're going to let that go about 5 minutes. So while that's simmering, I'm going to go ahead and cook up the meat. So we're going to add our remaining 2 tablespoons of olive oil. So I'm going to have to use one that's actually seasoned. That's okay. Or not seasoned. What am I trying to say? Infused. So there's 2 tablespoons of olive oil and 1 more tablespoon of sesame oil. And we're going to let that heat up just a bit, and then we're going to put our steak in there. So we're going to cook our steak. It's going to take about 5 to 7 minutes to completely cook through. And I'm not sure I'm happy with how much our sauce is thickening up. So if it's not thick enough, we can go ahead and make a slurry of a tablespoon of cornstarch and some water and mix it up, and then we can add it to that and let it thicken up a little bit more. So I am going to go ahead and add some more cornstarch and water to my sauce, because once we add our broccoli to this, it's going to thin out our sauce a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and stir this in. Now rice is just about done cooking, so after it's done, we can go ahead and start frying it up. So now I'm going to go ahead and start mixing up the vegetables, or cooking up the vegetables for the rice. So we're going to add some oil to our pan. I'm going to add some onion. It calls for a 1/4 cup, or I'm sorry, it calls for a 1/4 of a Vidalia onion. I have some frozen chopped onion, so I'm going to just put that in my pan. I don't know how much, it's a quarter, but that's close enough. And we're going to add a couple teaspoons of garlic. Probably should have started this a little earlier since I forgot my onions were frozen. That's all right. I'm gonna go ahead and get this going. And I realize too, these are like onion slices and not chopped onion, but that's okay. I don't have any fresh onions, so that's what I'm gonna use. So it looks like our steak is almost done. Just seeing a little bit of pink in there now. When it's done, I'll go ahead and move the rice pan up to the front so that it'll be on the bigger burner. Actually, I can probably switch them now since that's almost done. Alright, so I actually pulled my onion out and chopped up the slices a little bit. And now we want to add, well, the recipe says 1 cup of peas and carrots frozen mixed. I just have peas, so I'm just going to add a cup of peas. So now we want to cook these until the peas start to thaw a little bit, and then we're going to throw our rice in there. I've got a lot of extra moisture in here because my because my onions were frozen as well. So I want to cook some of that moisture out before I add the rice. Oh, so I'm going to go ahead and add this rice to my onion and peas. Hopefully I don't make a huge mess. No guarantees. Like that, I just threw it all over the stove. Back down. So now we want to cook this until our rice just starts to brown a little bit. While that's cooking, we're going to mix up 3 tablespoons of soy sauce. And a teaspoon of sesame oil. We're going to mix that together. That's going to go on top of our rice here in a minute. Alright, so our rice is starting to brown. In fact, it's starting to stick just a little bit. I'm going to pull this off the burner. And then I'm going to get 2 large eggs. Alright, so what we're going to do is crack our eggs in this little opening that we made in the center of our pan. We're going to scramble these up right in the middle here. And once your eggs are cooked, let's go ahead and stir that into your rice. And then once you've stirred that in, you're going to pour your soy sauce, sesame oil mixture over the rice and just stir that in enough to coat it. So I'm going to trade places again with these. And to our beef now, we are going to add our broccoli. And I've got a bag that's 4 cups of broccoli. We want to stir this in. We're going to go ahead and drizzle our sauce. Ooh, look at that. over the top of this. We're going to stir that all together. Oh my goodness, that looks beautiful. Okay, so I've got the rice and the beef and broccoli done. The rice is a little mushy. I think maybe I should have cooked it earlier today, put it in the refrigerator so it was cold, and then added it because I think it was still too warm and it just kept cooking when I just really wanted it to get hot. It tastes good though. I did taste a little bite. Taste another bite. It does taste really good. I'll taste a little bite of this beef. That's good. You want to try it? Okay, so the rice is mushy, but try it because it tastes good. Like it? It does taste like a Chinese restaurant, doesn't it? All right, good stuff. Got a thumbs up from the hubs, so that's good.
Yep.
Okay, so we're gonna eat our dinner, and then in a little while, I'm gonna go ahead and start my bread dough for tomorrow, that I'll bake tomorrow for my sourdough. Oh my gosh, I'm talking in circles. So in a couple of hours, I'll go ahead and get my sourdough bread dough started, and then we're gonna let it rise overnight. And actually, I don't know if I'm gonna start it tonight or start it in the morning. Anyway, when I get ready to start that, I'll bring you guys along with me. So that's it for right now, and we'll move on to the next part here shortly. Okay guys, it's the next morning. We are going to start our sourdough bread this morning. For dinners last night, we did eat about half of the beef and broccoli mix, and it was delicious. And so we've got about half of that we can eat for lunch today. For dinner, I'm just going to make one of the pizzas that I have in the freezer that we made together about a week or so ago. And so I don't have to worry about dinner, but I do want to get this bread going. So since I started this challenge, the pantry challenge, I did not buy any bread. We don't go through a ton of like sandwich bread, but we did use the last of what we had for lunch yesterday. We made some grilled cheese sandwiches, which were amazing, but now we don't have any bread. So I'm gonna make the sourdough into sandwich loaves. So we are going to start with our butter, and you need either half a cup of softened butter or you can use coconut oil. I'm using butter. This has been sitting out for several hours, so it's pretty soft, but I am going to, find my knife, I am going to cut this into smaller pieces just so it'll mix up better in my KitchenAid. And I did actually, I have a new KitchenAid. I found a really good deal before the holidays on the 7-quart. So I bought it, and then I cleaned up my 6-quart and gave it to my son and daughter-in-law because they were really wanting one. And so this lets them have one, you know, without having to spend the money on it. And that way I had some place to donate my old one. So they were really excited about that. All right, so we've got, I think I just cut my finger. We've got our half a cup or 1 stick of butter in our mixer. We want to add 2 tablespoons. Well, I really think I did cut my finger. Oh, I did. I can't be trusted with sharp objects. So you can add now 2 tablespoons of honey or sugar, and I am going to just use regular sugar. I do have some honey, and I would use that if I didn't have to make it liquid again to be able to use it. We've had it for quite a while, and Honey does not go bad, but after a while it will start to crystallize and you've got to melt it back down so that you can use it as a liquid product. So I'm just going to use regular sugar. So I'm going to put 2 tablespoons of sugar in with my butter. Then we want to add 1 tablespoon of salt. And then we're going to add 1 cup of our starter. And we want this to be very active and bubbly. And mine is pretty active. I keep my starter in the refrigerator because I don't make bread often enough to just leave it on the counter. It would end up going bad. So I took it out yesterday and fed it, but I didn't get it out in time for it to be truly active enough to get this dough started last night. So I am going to add a little bit of yeast to this recipe so that it doesn't take all day to rise. But anyway, so we're going to add 1 cup of our starter. And I love the way sourdough starter smells. I love that good yeasty smell. Okay, so I guess I did actually cut my finger because now it's bleeding. All right, so I'm gonna take the rest of this starter, which I still have about, I probably have another cup or maybe a cup and it's probably about a cup in here. And I'm just going to stick this back in the refrigerator until the next time I'm ready to use it for some bread. And then we wanna add 2.5 cups of water. And then last, we're going to add our flour. And we need about 8 cups of flour. I'm going to put in a couple and then I'm going to mix it up a little bit. I still have plastic on my controller knob here. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and add all but the last cup of flour. So I had 2, 3, and I said I was going to add yeast and then I forgot to put it in. So I'm going to put in about, let me see, about 5 or 6 teaspoons. I decided to do 5 since my starter was pretty active. It was more active than I realized it was. So I'm going to do 5 and we'll see how that works. So we want to mix all of this in, and then if we need some of that or all of that last cup of flour, we'll go ahead and add it. But we'll be able to tell as this dough gets kneaded up if it's too sticky. And actually I think this is just about right. I did do probably just a little more than a cup on that first cup that I measured in. We're gonna let this knead until it starts to be smooth and satiny looking, and it should be pulling away from the sides of your mixer. That usually takes about 8 to 10 minutes. So I'm gonna go ahead and just turn this on and let it go. Okay. So our dough looks like this. You want it to pass this window pane test where you can stretch your dough out. I have a Band-Aid on my finger now, so it's hard to do, but you can stretch it out pretty thin before it breaks, and that's what you want. So now we're just gonna let this rise. So I'm going to lay a towel over it, and we're gonna let it do its first rise. Now, if I had not used the additional yeast in this, it would take about 10 to 12 hours to double. And if I had been able to get this started last night, I would have just let that do its first rise overnight. But like I said, I didn't have it ready. So this will probably take a couple of hours. My husband and I have some errands to run, so I'm gonna let this start rising for its first time. We're gonna let it double, and then we'll go ahead and shape it and put it into the loaf pans for the final rise. And when we get back from our errands, then I'm gonna go ahead and make the blueberry bread and then finish up with our loaf bread. I mean our sandwich bread, whatever. You wanna set this in a warm place in your house. If you have a gas stove with a pilot light that you're sitting on top of your stove is a good place. If your refrigerator top is open, that's always a nice warm place. I have a cabinet directly over my refrigerator, so I can't put it on top of my fridge. My stove is electric, so what I'm gonna do is put it in my oven with just the light on, and that will provide enough warmth to help that proof. All right, so our dough is definitely doubled. Gonna dump it out of our pan, or I mean our bowl. Hopefully I didn't let this proof too long. We were gone longer than I expected. Ooh, this smells so good. All right, so I'm going to use some spray in our pans. And we're going to divide this dough into 2 pieces. And we want to roll it out into a nice rectangle. And then I'm just going to start rolling the dough like this, kind of tucking it as we get around each roll. And then I kind of measure for the length of the pan, roll that little piece under, and then I'm going to put it in my pan with the seam side down. Then I'm going to do the same to the other piece. And then we're going to let this rise again inside the pans until it's doubled again. Should take a couple of hours, maybe less since we added the yeast. And then it'll be ready to bake. Okay, so I've got both loaf pans full. I'm going to go set these on top of the stove and cover them. So we don't need the KitchenAid for the blueberry bread, so I put it away, wiped up the flour a little bit that I had here. And now we're going to start our blueberry loaf. So I'm going to preheat the oven to 375. And the first thing we're going to do is mix together some of our dry ingredients. So we need 2.5 cups of all-purpose flour. I'm using a 1/2 cup measure here. So there's our 2.5 cups. We want 1¼ cups of sugar. And 1½ teaspoons of baking powder. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and just whisk all this dry ingredient together in our bowl. And then we want to use our pastry dough blender to add in our butter. Okay, so we need to add 1 cup of butter to this. And 1 cup and 2 sticks are the same thing. So I've got some frozen butter here, and I'm just going to grate it, and that will help me get it mixed in better. And butter is very easy to grate when it's frozen like this, like a hard cheese kind of. And when I start getting down to the end, I get a little more careful because I don't want to grate my fingers. I've done it before, and trust me, if you've never done it, it is not fun. I'm throwing cheese all over, or butter all over the counter. So I'm gonna put all this butter in my flour mixture. It's starting to melt on my fingers here. So now I'm gonna take my pastry blender, or tool, or whatever, I don't even know what this thing is called. This thing, and I'm going to use it to blend my butter into my flour mixture. And we just want to blend it in until it's kind of crumbly looking. Definitely easier after we've grated that butter. So now we want to remove 3/4 of a cup of this mixture. And to that, we're going to add 1/2 teaspoon of cinnamon. I'm going to stir this up, and this is what we're going to use for our streusel topping. So what I'm making is a blueberry streusel loaf. I could have just made blueberry bread, but I like that kind of streusel crumb topping on the breads or the muffins. Okay, so now, okay, it says to mix your liquid ingredients in another bowl. I'm not going to do that. I typically don't. So we need 3/4 of a cup of milk. You certainly could mix it in a separate bowl if you would like. I used to when I first started baking, and I haven't for quite a while. It depends on the recipe, I guess, some, but typically I don't. Did I get the right amount? Oh yeah, 3/4 of a cup. I was so busy talking I forgot what I was looking for. And actually, maybe I'll just mix it all up in here. 3/4 of a cup of milk, 2 eggs, and a teaspoon of vanilla. Right, and a teaspoon of vanilla. And then I'm just gonna whisk this together. So I guess I did technically ended up using a separate bowl, even though that wasn't my intention. And then we're gonna pour this into our dry ingredients, and we're gonna mix gently just until everything is moistened. You don't wanna over mix this. And your batter is going to be thick. It's not gonna be like a cake mix pourable. It's gonna be a thick dough looking type batter. I'll show you here in just a second once I get all this mixed in. And I've got to get all this out of my whisk. Probably should have stirred this with a fork or something instead, but I forgot that this is thick when you make it. Okay, all right, so I've got my frozen blueberries here. And I'm gonna measure 2 cups out into this other bag. The rest of these back in my freezer. And then I'm gonna add just a little bit of flour to this bag and mix it all up. And this is what will help our blueberries not drop to the bottom of our bread while we're baking it. The first time I made a recipe that had blueberries in it, and I was just kind of making it up as I went along from another recipe, I didn't know that this would help, and so whatever I'd made, all my blueberries were on the bottom. And then I read somewhere that if you cover them with a little bit of flour first, it will help keep them in the middle of your bread and not on the bottom. Okay, so now I'm gonna go ahead and take our floured blueberries, put them in the bowl, and I'm just going to gently stir them into this bread mix. You want to be careful that you're not breaking your blueberries up, but you want to get them mixed into your dough. All right, and again, I'm just going to take some spray on my pan. And let me see. Does it tell me I should flour this? I don't remember. Okay, I don't think it says. So I'm gonna go ahead and put this in my pan now. Oh, this bowl is heavy. All right, so I'm just going to use my spatula to kind of get that off the edge there. I'm going to spread this out in my pan. There we go. It is, as you can see, very thick. All right. Okay, so now we want to sprinkle this with our crumb topping. Spread that out over our bread. All right, and then we're gonna put this in the oven. Our oven is preheated now. We're gonna bake this for about 50 minutes to an hour. And when it gets close, if we can't tell, we'll put a toothpick in it and make sure that it's done. So I'm gonna get that in the oven and get it started. All right, so our sandwich loaves have doubled in size already. I'm gonna add an egg wash. The egg wash is optional, but I like that extra browning that it gives it. So I'm gonna go ahead and add that. And then it actually bakes at 375, just like our blueberry loaf. So I'm gonna go ahead and put these in the oven with that blueberry bread. And our sandwich loaves should bake for about 45 minutes. So they should end up being done all about the same time. I'm gonna finish cleaning up while those bread loaves bake, and then when they're all done, we'll take a look at them. Okay, so our bread is finally done. Our sandwich loaves were done at about 40 minutes, and I think maybe I added too much yeast or my sourdough was more active than I thought, but they are very tall and that's fine, and I wish you could smell them. Oh my gosh, it smells so good in my kitchen. My banana bread, oh my goodness. Our blueberry bread, I actually had to bake it almost an extra 12 or 13 minutes, I think, to get it actually done. I don't know if it was taking longer because I had the sandwich loaves in there at the same time. Regardless, it now is beautiful. It's got a nice brown, crunchy looking top. I can't wait for it to cool so that I can cut into it, and my husband and I will have that as our snack this afternoon. But for all of our bread, we don't want to cut into it until it's completely cool. The sandwich bread particularly, I want to wait and make sure that it's completely cool, and then I'll probably slice maybe half of one loaf, and I'm going to wrap the other loaf up because I don't know how fast we're going to go through this. I don't want it to go bad, and I might put the second loaf in the freezer. I'm not sure yet. This, we want to make sure that it's reasonably cool before we start cutting into it, because otherwise your bread gets gummy when you try to cut it if it's still too hot. But so we got our 2 sandwich loaves, we got our blueberry loaf. While this was cooking, my husband and I finished up the leftovers of the beef and broccoli that we had for dinner last night. It was just as good warmed up in the microwave as it was fresh out of the pan last night, so that's definitely going on our list of things to have again. We both really loved it. And so I think that's going to do it for today's video. So I want to thank you guys for hanging out with me and watching me while I cook and make all these different items and, you know, try different things. I really appreciate it. If you like this video, please hit the like button. And if you're not a subscriber right now, if you would consider subscribing. I put out videos every week, generally on Tuesdays and Fridays. And so I will have another video coming out in a few days. All right, I will see you guys on the next video. Thanks for watching. Okay, so I know I already ended our video, but we just cut into the blueberry bread, and so we're gonna give it a taste now.
really good.
Mm.
I like it.
Mm-hmm. It's got like the perfect amount of sweetness, like it's not too sweet.
No, I like it.
And the crumb topping, that extra little crunch it gives is perfect. So if you guys like blueberry bread, definitely try this. All right, we'll see you on the next video. Thanks.